Everything is fine. The coffee is still hot. The fire is still holding. There is a tent behind you that took 45 minutes to pitch just right, and the forecast on your phone, checked before the battery dropped to 9%, says clear skies until tomorrow afternoon. The tent fabric ripples once. The lantern flame bends left. You notice neither. You figure it's nothing. The wind does this sometimes, a thermal draft rolling down the valley. The forecast was clear. The app hasn't updated, so it can't be a real system. You go back to your coffee. Then the wind doesn't stop. The fire bends flat. The temperature drops 10 degrees in 2 minutes. And then the sky behind the tree line lights up, white, total silent. 1 full second before the sound. The ground under this tent, the tree above it, and the clearing around it are about to become 3 separate, independent threats. And not one of them is waiting for the forecast to update. In daylight, the clearing tells a different story. That pale line across the sand, it's not a trail. It's the last flood's high water mark, pressed into the soil months ago and never washed away. The driftwood in the brush didn't fall from the trees. It was carried here, by water, moving fast enough to strip bark from a branch 30 feet up. This wasn't a clearing. It was a riverbed dry when you arrived and waiting. That clearing wasn't chosen badly. It was chosen exactly the way most people choose a campsite. Flat ground, soft soil, overhead cover, wind protection. The problem is that flat, sandy ground in the backcountry is rarely formed by wind. It is formed by water. That perfect tent site is the dry signature of a flood channel. And that branch overhead is not a falling hazard because there's a storm tonight. It is a hazard because it already fell in some storm months or years ago, and it never reached the ground. It has been sitting in the crotch of that tree ever since. A widowmaker isn't always a dead tree. It is often a dead limb, barkless and pale, waiting inside a perfectly healthy canopy. Debris lines, pale rotting bark, watershed topography. This is environmental literacy, and it only works before the stakes go in. Once the storm arrives, the site cannot be unchosen. The air inside the tent smells like metal now, the sharp, clean tang of ozone that arrives just before a close strike. Your aluminum poles are the tallest thing in this clearing. In a lightning storm, that makes them a conductor, not a shelter, a target. The next flash hits so close there's no gap between light and sound, just a white instant where the pole hub above your face is etched in razor-sharp silhouette. And then the thunder hits your chest like a physical blow. The instinct is to stay low, stay inside. The instinct is wrong, but not for the reason most people think. Camping lightning safety isn't about the bolt above you. It's about what happens beneath you. A tent with aluminum poles is not a Faraday cage. A true Faraday cage is a continuous conductive shell, the metal roof and frame of a hard-topped vehicle, the fuselage of an aircraft. A tent has massive gaps in its conductive framework, and more importantly, the person inside is lying directly on the ground, separated from the earth by a millimeter of nylon and a foam pad. Step voltage, ground current, is responsible for roughly 50% of all lightning deaths and injuries. The direct strike, the one everyone pictures, accounts for 3 to 5%. When lightning hits the earth, the current radiates outward through the soil. Anyone lying flat across that path creates a voltage difference between their head and their feet that drives current straight through the torso and heart. Lying flat is the worst possible response. It maximizes the contact distance between 2 points on the ground, which maximizes the voltage driven through you. The lightning crouch. Get off the tent floor. Find your foam sleeping pad and fold it. Crouch low on it, heels locked together. Weight on the balls of your feet, hands clamped over your ears, head tucked. Heels together routes any rising current from one foot directly to the other, bypassing the torso. The insulated pad breaks the ground contact. This is the lightning crouch position, and it works because of physics, not instinct. There is a dead limb up there. Arborists call it a widowmaker. It weighs as much as a refrigerator. It has been hanging in that tree for years, waiting for exactly this storm. In 60-mile-an-hour wind, the branch that shaded your tent becomes a guillotine. The thrashing above you isn't just noise, it's a countdown. And the thing about widowmakers is, you never hear the one that hits you. You only hear the ones that miss. It does not take a hurricane. Beaufort Force 8 gusts of 39 to 46 miles per hour is sufficient to snap live branches. That is a strong gale, not a catastrophe on any weather forecast. A strong gale is the kind of wind that makes walking difficult, that makes your tent poles shudder. It is the kind of wind that drops widowmakers. Wind speed alone cannot be trusted as a safety metric under a compromised canopy. Certain species, eucalyptus being the most documented, drop massive limbs in completely calm, dry conditions as a water conservation response. There is no warning gust, no storm required. The tree simply releases. The only reliable metric is what you can see before you pitch the tent. A pale, barkless limb hung up in the fork of an otherwise healthy tree is a widowmaker regardless of the forecast. The lightning missed, the branch missed, but a third threat has been moving toward this camp since before the storm ever arrived overhead, and it has been moving in complete silence. The wash beside your tent is still dry. It looks exactly as it did when you pitched the tent 3 hours ago. But there is a sensation now felt through the ground before it registers as sound. A low, deep vibration, like a freight train, still miles away, still coming. In a narrow desert wash, floodwater can arrive as a wall 6 feet high, moving at 30 miles an hour, carrying everything it ripped out upstream. The dry sand under your tent will be underwater in less than 90 seconds from the moment you hear it. You won't outrun it. You have to not be there when it arrives. Not thunder, not a passing truck. That low-frequency rumble is boulders and debris grinding against bedrock beneath the surface of an advancing mudflow. Flash flood warning signs camping guides always say, "Listen for rushing water." That is too late. The first signal is geological. It comes through the ground before the water is audible, and certainly before it is visible. A dry wash in the backcountry can carry 3 to 5 feet of debris-laden water within 20 to 30 minutes of a storm that dropped its rain miles away. With zero visible rain at the campsite, the flood channel doesn't care where the storm is. It collects every drop that falls on the surrounding watershed and funnels it to the lowest point. The tent is in that lowest point. By the time that rumble is loud enough to register as water and not distant thunder, the safe window to reach higher ground has, in most cases, already closed. Every hazard on this site is now identified: step voltage from the sky, the widowmaker from the canopy, the flash flood from the ground. So why do most campers, even ones who know all of this, just stay in the tent? You are lying perfectly still in your sleeping bag. Every gust is louder than the last. Every crack of thunder is closer. Your body knows the tent is no longer shelter, it's a trap. But you don't move. This is the most dangerous moment in any survival situation. The gap between knowing you need to act and actually acting. The brain runs through options. None of them are comfortable. All of them involve leaving the tent. So you wait. You rationalize. You tell yourself the storm might pass. It won't. And you know it won't. But knowing and doing are not the same thing. The brain is not running on the storm in front of it. It is running on the forecast from 6 hours ago. Psychologists call this normalcy bias, the deeply ingrained tendency to underestimate both the likelihood of a disaster and its consequences. Research puts it at roughly 80% of people in an escalating crisis actively minimizing the threat, trusting outdated information over their own senses. The internal voice is predictable. It runs something like this: the forecast said clear. The app hasn't updated, so it can't be a major system. That rumbling is probably just a truck on the highway. The wind is a thermal draft. I spent an hour tensioning these guidelines. I am not tearing this down in the dark for a passing squall. and with every repetition, the window narrows. Compound this with milling, the social behavior where people in ambiguous threat situations wait for external confirmation before acting. In an urban emergency, you check the news, call a neighbor, step outside. In the backcountry, separated from cell signal, the only other confirmation available is a tent mate who is still asleep. A silent tent mate reads as social proof that the threat is low. So you wait, and then the sunk cost settles in. A perfectly pitched tent, an hour of work, dry gear organized, suspended from the trees. Breaking camp in the dark means packing wet, navigating blind, and guaranteeing misery. The brain weighs guaranteed discomfort against probable danger and chooses the gamble every time. The rule is simple to state. If the time between a lightning flash and the thunder that follows is 30 seconds or less, the storm is within 6 miles. That is the 30-30 rule, and it is your hard trigger. At 30 seconds or less, you are not assessing anymore. You are moving. The trigger for action is the first sensory deviation from the forecast, not the moment the danger becomes impossible to ignore. When the ground truth contradicts the old data loses. Not after 5 more minutes, not after your tent mate wakes up. At the first deviation, the safest moment to decide is always earlier than your instincts say it needs to be. The storm passed at 4 a.m. By dawn, the forest is unrecognizable, not wrecked, but rearranged. The wash below is still running, thick and brown, carrying branches and silt toward the valley. The clearing where the tent had been is underwater now. It would have been underwater at 2 a.m. The decision to move, made in the dark, in the wind, with the thunder still coming, was the right one. You're alive because you acted before the evidence arrived. That's the difference between surviving a storm and being caught in one. You pack your gear in the quiet, methodical, unhurried. The storm is gone. You're still here. This video opened with a question. How does a campsite you spent an hour perfecting become the most dangerous place in the forest before you've fallen asleep? The answer was never one thing. It was 3 converging systems: step voltage from below, a widowmaker from above, and a flash flood from upstream. And every one of them was readable before the first stake went in. Reading the ground, the canopy, and the sky is one half of the system. The other half is refusing to let comfort, sunk cost, and tomorrow's forecast talk you out of moving tonight. Prepare before the sky tells you to. Surviving the flood and the strike is one battle. What happens to a wet, hypothermic body in the hours after evacuation is another, and most people lose that fight to a mistake made while trying to help. That is next. If you found this valuable, subscribe to Gridfall Survival for more ways to think ahead and survive the unexpected. Prepare, adapt, outlast.